Okay, yeah, well, the stream is about to start. You guys need to do all your chicken noises.
What?
Chicken noises. What does a Valk sound like?
What does that say?
Yep, okay. All of that's on camera. Hooray! Alright, guys, give you a moment here. Looks like I'm streaming finally. I don't know why. Sometimes it says, okay, you're streaming, and then I'm not. Upstream sound is good. Okay, so as you guys can see, Doom does approach. I'm going to hide my, get my document up on my screen. So as we've been doing, we're going to do the Tidings with Tyler, and I'll go over kind of some of the stuff we hit last week and some of the things that we're doing this week. This will be followed by an update later today. I'll give, we'll have some new screenshots. I'm going to show you guys some of the stuff that I showed last night. I did a late night stream, kind of some world building stuff, and went through a lot of the different biomes that I was working on. And by biome, I mean kind of a self-contained setting of something like grassy hills, pine trees, rocky area, things like that that get turned into the islands. So this week for me has just been a whole lot of art. We are still slowly getting to the tail end of all the materials, the material update from 2 weeks back. As I said, it's a lot of work because I think there were something like 150 materials or something like that that all needed another layer of textures and love. And one of the things we found out is it gives us so much more control over how everything looks, that not only did we come up with a whole bunch of really cool ideas that we want to do for different elements of the game, which we, like I said, we just started coming up with them, but we very quickly learned that it's kind of an artist's playground and nightmare at the same time, because we have so much more that we can futz with to really make things pop. In the update later today, I'm going to include a shot that Cross got me this morning. One of the things we wanted to do was to make some new materials for Cube, some things that took advantage of the new lighting and rendering. So you'll see a really kind of a cool screenshot on that in a little bit later today. And like I said, the other thing, last night when I was going over stuff, I'll show you guys some of the things I'm working on, and next week is going to be the next step of world building, which is putting a lot of the different biomes together, turning them into a big island, and creating a playground for you guys to play in and kill each other in. So let me go over the last week's progress, this week's progress. Last week we got in a whole lot of ability work. Ben, am I saying this correctly when I say that you've gotten in all the different components, like you've put them together, what they're supposed to do?
Yes, all of the
I don't want to
components.
misrepresent it.
Yeah, the components themselves, the data from the spreadsheet has been imported into the game, and then
They're actually not in the camera.
I
didn't think you were going to roll over, but sure.
Well,
I just want to make sure I wasn't saying that wrong.
There's a lot to that process. So we have all of the data imported from the spreadsheet into the game for all of the various components. And then we've gone through and created the logic trees that define how the stats from the ability components are actually executed, like saying that, okay, this has X amount of damage, but are we doing that damage in an AoE? Are we doing that damage directly to a target? Are we doing that damage and then modifying it based on the amount of maximum health that player has, or based on if they're bleeding or not? We do bonus damage and things like that. All of that information has been configured, and at this point we're primarily trying to track down and fix bugs related to, it says it's doing this, but it's not actually, or it's supposed to be doing it in this way, but part of it's not applying properly, or it's not getting communicated. And so fixing all the bugs is what we're talking about and what the engineers are having a meeting about, because there's a number of those issues that are either systemic in such a way that it would require an underlying change to some of the foundational bits, or just individual where one specific action doesn't work and we just need to fix those few targeted things that are specific to only one specific type of functionality.
Cool. That was it.
Yeah.
Basically, as I think I said maybe a couple of weeks ago, everything that Ben's doing makes, when I play with the terrain editor, look like child's play. Because you go over to he's got 2 monitors up just full of numbers, and then he pulls up 2 clients and he hits one guy and then sees what the other guy does. And one of the things we realized was we were going to need some way to really tell what was going on. So Mark Hernandez put together a tool late one night. I mean, you know, there, I am proud to be working with certain people like Ben that puts in all this time to actually get all of this stuff done. It's very cool that you're putting all this time and dedication to do it. And on the other side, I've got other people on the team who just get interested in helping Ben, such as Hernandez, who late one night put together a tool or started putting together a tool that we've already been using to basically find out what exactly is happening with abilities, because there's so many different parts where it could be breaking. With the way they're all put together, we have to kind of find exactly what's happening, and so he put together a tool for that, which has been very useful, and I think he's still auditing.
Well, we're still working on expanding that functionality. Tim just recently changed it so that it outputs that to a text file, so the log file now has combat events in it, as opposed to just outputting it to the chat window, which is getting overrun by the very, very large number of data points that we have to have for abilities. So there's still bits that have to happen, and there are ever more bits that aren't included in that, right? That, well, now we track that it does damage, but we want to track to do damage based on a trigger happening, to do damage based on passing or failing a requirement, and like getting all of the full dump of all of the things that ability did and how it got to doing what it was doing will help us identify exactly where in the large amount of
I have to say this has been personally enlightening, because there's a lot of just having the idea of how something should work is a totally different thing compared to actually making it all work. And then once you start tying all these things together, it gets very complex. So
a large part of design is actually designing stuff on paper. A large part of design is implementation and actually getting it to work.
Yeah. Okay, so right now, as I was saying, we're going through basically doing a lot of bug hunting, figuring out what either isn't working or needs a little bit of help. I think we're also working on some other pieces like deployables. We have to get progression in and do more testing on that.
And there are some things like that too, where it's like there aren't any bugs with deployables; they're just not in the game yet.
Yeah.
So there are some features where it's like we want, as we were talking about in the thing, like we want the stone healer to be able to actually deploy a stone and have healing going on around it. Like that's something that, we've had the earth wall in the game before, we've had like the firewall in the game before. Those are actually two completely different things, because one's a physics kinetic object and the other one's just a cloud effect in a specific shape. But we haven't done anything that's quite like this that sort of does both of those things, where there's a spell effect that's happening and there's a physical object. So, and they're tied together, where if you destroy the physical object, the spell effect goes away. So there are bits like that we actually still need to implement and get into the game.
So if Ben wasn't already overwhelmed with all the tools he has and we're trying to debug, then we're going to add something else in too.
Yeah, well, and that's been this process, right? That we sort of started off with having very little functionality and putting a bunch of data in, and then as I've been putting those things together, we've also been adding new features, and so I've had to go back and re-audit and revise some of the things that I had to, temporarily put off because it didn't have the functionality when I started implementing it to actually be able to do what I wanted it to do. So you have to go back and retrofit it now to be like, oh, well, I took this out because it wasn't working at the time and I didn't know if we were going to get it or not. Now I can go back and put it back in, and then there might be bugs with it because it was just implemented and nobody tested it really. And so a lot of these interdependencies of things like armor penetration, but we didn't have armor, so we couldn't do armor penetration. And now we have armor, but armor penetration doesn't work because we don't actually factor in armor class. And so yeah, just lots and lots of things.
So if it's not clear, there's a lot of stuff that we're trying to put in, and as we've been saying for a couple of weeks here, is just trying to figure out all the bugs, figure out the missing pieces, what's left to do. Literally, I've got engineers over there working on that conversation right now, mainly because we have different areas of the game that are maybe ahead or behind or in the middle of others that we're just trying to figure out what we want to do. I've got some things that are in polish and some things in art that just need to be done. Same thing with design and engineering. We have a lot of the plot structure put together, and so now we're looking at other things to add to plots, but I might as well just go back to my document because I think I covered that at some point. Thank you. Let's see. That's the dump on abilities for right now. Last week, Andrew was doing a whole bunch of some camera tweaking and some quality of life for a lot of the code, going through and doing some bug fixing. We started hooking up the ballista to the pre-existing camera controls. Basically, Dave has gotten very excited about the ballista, and that has driven a lot more conversation about siege mechanics. If you caught Mark's update earlier, his live stream a couple of days ago, he starts talking about siege mechanics. So if you're at all interested in siege mechanics, go back, check out his stream. Um, I promise we'll eventually have some really fun art to talk about when we go into streaming stuff. Um, and one of the things Mark wants to do is make sure that we don't go status quo with siege mechanics. That we don't do mirrored elements in siege. That we have a lot of BSC ideas. All of this is in flux right now. So if you want to kind of catch up on that conversation, jump back to Mark's stream. Ballista-wise, however, it's kind of one of those things where you start to realize all the different mechanics that come together to put this thing in. Dave's hooking it up. We're hooking up sound to it. We're probably going to have minimal animation at this point. It's more making sure that the thing mechanically works versus just sticking animations on top of it. I think there's been a little bit of conversation about possibly being able to move the ballista around versus craft it, leave all your items, build it, and set it up in a stationary place. I think Dave would like to try and get it so that we can move that. No promises yet. Let's see, my notes are funny because I wrote, we've gone a little siege crazy. Tyler. All right. Last week on buildings, we actually made some huge leaps in a lot of the tech that we were working towards. Got us to a point last week where we were able to put in per block health, per block stability, per block material types, per block material quality. All of these things are calculated per block when you do anything to it, whether you're building or not. Some of the fun things we were doing is we put a door frame, the door frame was made out of stone, and then we put, or I think it was made out of wood, and then we put stone blocks on top, and since each one of these individual blocks counts its weight individually, we were able to actually see the little damage states start to draw on top of the framing element. So now when you actually have to build your blocks, we have the beginnings of the concept of crafting the block, the quality of it, and different material types. For Beta 1 right now we have a wood and a stone, and once we really expand on the crafting system, we'll then be able to really expound on the number of blocks, the types of blocks, where you're getting all the materials to do this. So right now, like I said, just focus on, we're trying to get all that tech in and make it work. And it's actually really, really cool. The plot sizes are fairly small right now because we're focused on quantity over size of the plots. So the number we've been talking about is 2,500 buildings. If you look 2 weeks back, 2 updates back, we have a bunch of screenshots that are just impressive beyond belief when you think about what it is we're doing, where we've just, there you can see all the square castles that basically Rob has a command to build castle in every plot, and each plot is representative of 30,000 blocks. So we have 2,500 building plots of 30,000 blocks apiece, all running on the server, and you can walk up to it and beat on it. And when we get into Beta 1, you won't be able to knock the building down very quickly. So we'll be able to play with different mechanics where we see what happens with our tech when we've got lots of people beating on things and trying to knock stuff down. Once we get through that period, then we can start working on bigger, we can work on rubble, things like that. But right now, as we've always said, we always try and hit the hard stuff first. So quantity was our big hard goal. So 2,500 castles, pretty cool. And like I said, we'll start working on bigger. This week, we're slowing down on buildings and focusing a lot more on bug fixes and performances. I absolutely love Rob. He's kind of a producer's dream in that he went ahead and put together a giant list of everything that he feels needs to be done for buildings moving forward, which was great. We've got George working on some of that stuff with him. Andrew's been working on some performance fixes for buildings. But this week, a little light on buildings. Crafting, last week we got mass in on our inventory, so different weapons, items, armor, everything that you craft has a weight to it now, just as with everything else that's going through bug fixing. What else do we get in there? We put in, right now, anybody who's in Hatchery will notice that your Vox is, we're using the model of the moon. I think it was just a fun thing that Mark grabbed, Hernandez. So the moon model that's up in the sky is your placed Vox. And the whole point of that is so we have something that you actually have to be physically near to actually craft. And it's your own Vox. If you caught John's live stream yesterday, he started working on a Vox model. And of course, this thing's going to change as we iterate upon the Vox mechanics, and then we actually start building out the UI and the crafting system to work with that. For right now, though, we're going to make sure you have a nice little Vox model to put down on the ground, bring your stuff to, and then craft your first sword. Let's see. We added alloys. We built the first sword. Like I said, last week we started working on being able to craft the ballista. One of the fun things that happens is one person gets really excited about one thing, and then someone else is like, oh, hey, I think I can make my stuff work with that. So the ballista started out as place ballista fire, and then it turned into, can we craft that thing? And so we broke it up into a bunch of different pieces. So now it's going to be a craftable object. And then that turned into, well, what about ammunition? And since ammunition is something that we started to put in for archery, we figured we might as well use that for ballistas. So now you'll actually have to craft your ammunition, bring it to the ballista, and the ballista will, as I'm told, will suck up the ammunition that you place on the ground. Let's see. Last week for the patcher, which is sitting up on my screen, we did a lot of cleanup, some CSS fixes. Since then, we've been putting in a new version of the character creation that will have stats with stat feedback, so you can actually see what your stats are going to do. This is going to be according to the stats that we've implemented based on for beta 1, because we have some things that we're not hooking up yet. Like we don't have veil storms in the game, so there's a stat that's related to your attunement to the veil and different mechanics that we haven't even gotten into yet. So this will just be the stats that are related to beta 1, agility, strength, dexterity, can't remember them all. But that's going to be a lot of fun, because one of the things we wanted to do was actually make character creation a little more meaningful, more than cosmetic. So we're actually allowing you to put stats on your character that will make his playstyle more like what you want to do. I like this personally because it harkens back to just tabletop D&D, where if you wanted the really quick character, the character that could carry a lot, or the really strong endurance, all that stuff will actually have effects in the game. An example of that, we've had agility in the game for quite a while, has always made your top run speed faster. So a lot of the melee characters would put a lot into agility, and then you basically couldn't get away from them, and they would chase down all my mages. Damn you! Let's see. So we've started hooking up Banes and Boons. We're going to put Banes and Boons in the character creation. It'll be a limited set of Banes and Boons based off the mechanics that we can do. That character creation process is already moving forward. Anybody who's been jumping into the game will have seen the in-progress version. JB has now moved on to setting up groups. He's very excited about all the stuff he's doing with group servers and trying to make it really stable, and I've heard a lot about it, and he's very excited about it. Let's see. Let's jump into art here. Last week, we were continuing on finishing up armor and getting the Valks in, and I think I said we were starting on the picks. So the picks now have been created. They're mostly a cosmetic change for what art has to do. So last week's update, we had a shot of the male. This week's update, we'll have a shot of the female with all her tattoos. They look really cool, and I think it'll be a lot of fun when we kind of figure out what mechanics they're going to do. If you want any hints about the picks, we do have a Becoming story, which let me make sure is actually, I think it's on our website. Picks. Okay, I'm going to punt on looking for that because I've got way too many things running on my computer right now that are keeping me from being able to read anything. All right. Picks. Like I said, environment-wise, one of the things I was doing was setting up some of the biomes. Remember when we talk about realms taking over terrain, that we're not doing the concept of this forest now becomes a TDD forest, or this forest now becomes an Arthurian forest. What we're doing is an influence upon what is pre-existing. So one of the things I did was I created the different grasslands for the different realms, and I showed some of that last night. You can pop over to that stream, see some of the work in progress for that. And then for the pine forest, created different biomes for the pine forest, so that if you ran in there, you'd suddenly be like, oh, well, clearly the TDD have taken this area over. But it still effectively looks like the pine forest you may have been in when your realm owned it previously. One of the other things I've been working on, you guys would have seen, I've got a lot of fun ideas for putting together different biomes. I had the floaty rock screenshot. That's something I want to get to. I got to hit beaches. But in the meantime, it's just been a lot of putting all these pieces together, and then next week it'll be island building. We've done a lot of polish on the armor. I'm waiting for one fix from George on the way that we display characters that isn't quite working. Basically, we can't get things as shiny as we would like them to be, or as grimy as we would like them to be. So when we get that done, we'll start just having polish time on all the armor. Let's see, what else? Vox model stand-in, tackle mat updates. This week was Dion's first day in the office. Dion is someone who's been in the background working mostly with me. Also a lot of the character work. All of the armor shots that you've seen, John's been doing all the sculpting, and Dion's been doing all the materials. So if you liked any of that stuff, she's now in the office and will continue doing a polish on those, and is also helping me out with environment. So a lot of the bushes, ground textures, things like that, she's been able to tackle. I'm really happy she's here. She has a very good eye for things, and also is able to do things far quicker than I expect her to. I think the first time I gave her a bunch of terrain textures to do, she just whipped them all out, and I was like, you're done? And I was able to open them up and be like, wow, these are actually really good, which was just honestly something I didn't expect from someone tackling terrain textures on their first try. We'll make sure and get a bio of her in the next newsletter. In the meantime, you may see her stream over the next couple of weeks doing work on environment or armor. Let's see. The other thing, John's been putting together a lot of the pieces for the Place of Power. Ben's going to take a quick stab at the island at some point to kind of give me the design perspective of where the Place of Power goes, where we want to put plots, things like that. But I actually have to create the Place of Power. So I'll show you guys the work in progress on that in a moment. Let's see. Fun materials for Cube, I covered that. Bull is trying to find time for getting some sound events in for the game so that we can actually hook up different sounds per parts of the ability. If you remember, our ability system and the visuals that accompany it are kind of a 5-part system that are hooked up to animations and sound and VFX, where you have like a prepare time. You go into actually casting. The best example is kind of preparing, casting, firing, and recovering. And that allows us lots of different numbers to play with, but we haven't been able to actually hook up different sounds to that part. So Bull is working on that when he's not triaging anything having to do with abilities and the ability importer for Ben. That actually, I think, covers what's going on right now. So I'm going to jump over. Let me show you guys what I was working on last night. Actually, here, this is a little sneak peek. This is if you look at any of the updates, I've been showing pictures of the work in progress of the neutral pine forest. This is the Viking-influenced pine forest. One of the things we did was go less warm, saturated red for the pine needles on the ground, more sticks, more grass, more low rock cover, ground cover. The bushes all change. The grass is scruffier. These are actually modeled after holly bushes. We tweaked the levels and contrast on the bark. The trees get a little more Spartan in their density. The rocks change. Where's a rock? So I'm going to fly, and this is going to go really fast. It's just, yeah, it doesn't. Oh. And like I said, we're bug fixing. So that was your quick view of the Viking pine forest. I have to finish up the TDD and the Arthurian, and then we'll start putting those together with some beach stuff. And I went through the old forest that we've had in there for a while, fixed all of their materials, and actually it looks way better now. So you guys will see that soon. What I was working on last night was the Place of Power. What the Place of Power looked like to anybody who was in the game was a bunch of cubes previously. That's basically called white boxing, where a designer will go in and flesh out the gameplay area, and then it's up to the artist to make it interesting. So if you looked at any of the updates, we've had shots of some of the stuff John's been modeling, like this big floating thing. I'll let you guys take guesses of what that actually is. That will be floating over the Place of Power. He started building out these pieces for me. They're basically big rock constructs, and right now I'm trying to figure out what materials I want to use on them, and I've been playing around with the concept of large obsidian pieces poking up out of the rock, which I think will give a nice visual variation and also be fun for our new material system. So this was the very quick work in progress late last night, and all of this outer area needs to be removed, and then we'll sink the whole thing down into the ground. I'm fairly excited to work on this. John also made these cool gate structures, and he did a really great job. He was saying that he doesn't do environment stuff, or really hasn't had a lot of experience with environment stuff. So one of the things I said was, look, I need to have a lot of modular pieces. So all of this actually comes apart. You can see it's a bunch of different pieces, and what I was illustrating last night was an example of being able to reuse these in other places on the map. Where's my piece? So over here I took the same, some of the pre-existing pieces, and was considering them as outside pieces. So if he was scaled down and maybe you were over here shooting arrows or hucking fireballs from over here, you'd have little spots where you could hide, and we can reuse these pieces on the lip of the crater. So basically he's just a big jigsaw puzzle that needs to be put together, and then throw a little bit of aesthetic love working on all the materials. I'm very excited. We have glow in the game, so I'll be able to put glows on things, lights, VFX, all that kind of fun stuff later this week. And it's actually 4, and I'm very tight on time today, so if you want I can do a couple of quick questions, and I got to get back to work. I got to finish up the update, attach screenshots to it, and get that out to you guys. Oh yes, knockback will be a crap load of fun. People were already using the shove mechanic that I think the Lucre Pans had before we were putting in all the classes, knocking people off of this thing. You'd look away from your screen for a moment, and your guy would be down in the pit dead. Did we call that thing a dragon's tooth? Because everybody wrote dragon's tooth, obviously, when I said you guys can figure out what that is. Or is that just everybody coming to the same conclusion? Any more art-centric? Like I said, don't go with the design questions. Like I said, we're still working on figuring out where we're at with all the work that we pushed into the client. Figuring out some areas we're in bug fixing, some areas we're in polish, and in some areas we're still adding new features. Beta 1 water will stick with just the plain. Right now I do not want to try and shove in more stuff. We've talked about NVIDIA WaveWorks, but we're not putting that in yet. Right now we're going to go with just water, as it's not really a main mechanic for Beta 1. Viking territories will have fallen snow. One of the things we don't want to do is make the Vikings the snow realm. We're looking at a lot of different things for how the Vikings will look. And remember, it doesn't just because it snows doesn't mean that it's only one realm. It can, if you take over an area where it snows, technically your TDE area will have snow. How many places of power might you be thinking? Right now we're going to implement this one place of power. As you can see, it's no small amount of work to put this thing together. There's also a lot of design that has to happen once this thing is actually placed in the world. We have to think about everything around it and what players are doing with it. So there's a lot of work just going into this one, and this will give us a lot of clues on how much we're going to do moving forward, how much time it takes to implement these things in the world, and what mechanics we can do in the future. Will crafters and players be able to build near or around the pop, the place of power? I'm going to tentatively say yes. That's one of the things I was saying we have to figure out is the outside area of this. I'm going to let Ben guide me on what we're doing for the island in that respect and where we're going to put the plots, and that's just something we have to figure out yet and get them in. And the nice thing is with our tech that we can make changes very quick and on the fly, so you guys could be playing, we don't have to pull the server down, we can just move things around and make small changes fairly quickly. Thoughts on the biomes growing or aging depending on how long they've been under our realm's control. We definitely have thoughts on that. You have to remember is that doing something like that, not only is there a tech requirement that we have to implement, but there's also a lot of art that has to go with it. The minute you say that something is going to look different, there's more art. However, there are simpler ideas we've thrown around that we're not committed to yet, which will be ideas of the forest. There'll be more trees in it. The tree, could grow out from its central point. Things like that we've talked about. It's certainly not a beta 1 idea, but it's something we all would like to do. No plans for tree houses right now that I'm aware of. However, I wouldn't be surprised if Mark is like, I've said that 100 times. Tree houses and all the pine trees, just to give me a headache as an artist. How many man hours in that POP so far? Hey, John. How many work days do you think you put into the place of power assets you built for me? It was a question of how many man hours have gone into it so far. Like 3-4 days? Yeah, so it's about 3 or 4 days modeling these things, and like I said, that's these pieces that are clearly, obviously, more modeled. This doesn't have its textures. However, there's still more time that needs to get put into this. I will probably need, at minimum, a full day to kind of assemble this into a rough pass. And then at that point, it'll just be like rejiggering and placing things and being more of an artist than an assembler. Okay, I'm going to go. I really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your own busy schedules to come in and check in on us. We're still continuing to do a lot of work. Everybody's in good spirits and healthy. Actually, I should take back the healthy. We just got hit by the pollen season, so it's been an in and out for a lot of people this week. There's also female hours being included with our man hours, just so you're not offended. Okay, I'm going to go look for the update that'll come out later today. There'll be some new screenshots. One of the things will be that I really like was Cross's screenshot of the new materials that we're able to add into Cube. That'll have to wait until we actually do a Cube push, but for right now we're actually just building new materials. So I will talk to you guys next week. That's about it. And Place of Power, exciting things. Thanks. Turn off